lecture will be about seizure disorders. So, to start, I'll just share my slides. Wait for a while. Okay, can you see my slides now?
Yes, Doc.
Okay, so again, so this will just be a short lecture. We'll make it fast because the weather is not good. The connection is quite bad as well. So again, this is a lecture and approach to patients with neurologic disorders. So this is taken from Harrison Steele, the first chapter on the neurology, chapter on neurology. So for introduction, so neurologic diseases, as we all know, they are very common and also one of the most costly diseases that the human encounter. No, according to the World Health Organization, they affect over 1 billion people worldwide, constituting about 12% of the global burden of diseases and causes 14% of global deaths. So these patients begin, or the approach to this type of patients begin on the history, of course, and then pattern down to the anatomic side of the brain and then the pathophysiology. Only then, after we know the history and then we can pinpoint what part of the brain is affected, can we get the specific neurologic diagnosis. So, how do you um, approach patients with neurologic? So first and foremost is you define the anatomy, no? So of course, we all know the brain or the neurologic parts of the brain, the cerebrum, cerebellum, the brainstem, and all those. So depending on which part of the brain is affected, uh, it also the symptoms of the patient also depends on the part that is affected. So for example, it could be on the cerebrum side, so more or less the cognitive function, and then cerebellar could be the um, balance of the patient. The gait could also be affected. So that's the first priority of approaching patients with neurologic disorder is to identify which part of the nervous system is affected, no? And then once it is already defined or you already know what part of the brain, then you can specify if it is multifocal or if it's a diffused process. And then is it only affecting the brain or is it part of the systemic illness? No, could be due to hypertension or diabetes or other parts. And then, is it only affecting your CNS or it also affects your peripheral nervous system or both? And then, as mentioned, is it the cerebral cortex that is affected, the basal ganglia, the brainstem, cerebellar, or the spinal cord that is responsible for the symptoms of the patient? Now, in the PNS, the disorder could be located in the peripheral nerves. So it could either be affecting your motor or sensation if it's primarily affected. And then it could also be in the neuromuscular junction. So more or less motor po nang affected. So deciding where the lesion is accomplishes the task of limiting the possible etiologies to a manageable finite number. So once the question of where is the lesion is already answered, now the next question is what is the lesion or what type of the disease is the patient having. So to define, so you already defined the anatomy, then next is to define the pathophysiology. So Primarily, your neuronal or gray matter disorders usually affects your cognitive and movement disorders and also seizures, no? So that's the primary problem of your cerebrum. What white matters naman also involves your long tract. So it could either also involve your motor, sensory, visual, and your cerebellar pathways. More commonly, progressive or symmetric symptoms, meaning both sides, not just one. It could either be a metabolic or degenerative origin, no? Sometimes, usually in mga diabetic na mga patients or those with mga autoimmune disorders, so possible siya. Lermit syndrome or symptom, so this is an electric shock-like sensation evoked by your neck flexion. So it is due to a ectopic impulses generating in the white matter pathways and occurs with demyelination. So it is commonly seen in MS or multiple sclerosis na mga patients in a young adult or pwede pod in a cervical spondylosis na mga patients in the elderly. So you already know the lesion, where is the lesion, what type of the lesion, and next important thing is the neurologic history. So commonly, you need to give attention to what the patient experienced, and of course, including those, the family members that accompanied the patient or who found the patient, no? Usually, if it's acute or chronic na onset. And sometimes also the patient does not identify the symptoms, especially if, let's say, for example, facial asymmetry. Usually the SOs or the family members are the ones who notice first the facial asymmetry of the patient, no? And then what are the associated signs and symptoms? So if, let's say, for example, the patient came in with facial asymmetry or weakness of uh, the right lower or upper extremities. And then what are the associated features? Is it accompanied with uh, speech, slurred speech, uh, headache, dizziness, or numbness of the extremities? And then let's say, for example, the patient came in with changes in sensorium. Is it related? Does it come with fever, history of fever, headache for the past few days, vomiting, and all that? No. And then another question is, has the patient been having difficulty in brushing or reaching, no, mga motor um, activities of the patient, unable to button, twist the bottle, cup of the bottle, and also the negative association should also be included, no, if there are non associated features, no. Now, pertinent history. So the temporal course of the disease. So it is important, no, to precise the appearance or the progression of the symptoms. Let's say, for example, the patient arrived at the ER probably at around 8 p.m. So then you then ask if the patient came in with uh, weakness of the right-sided weakness. So since the patient came in at 8 p.m., then you ask what time the weakness was noticed, in the morning, hours prior to the specifically, if they can be precise as much as possible, how many hours after seeing the bringing the patient to the emergency room, uh, 4 hours, 5 hours, or more than 24 hours that the patient has been having the symptoms and then progressed lang. Maybe the patient initially still able to lift the upper extremities and then suddenly it progresses to the strength is 1 or 2/5 and then associated with other symptoms, no? Or as much as possible, ask the patient the description of the complaint, no? Okay, at times there are different terms, no, that the patient is experiencing, or even here in the Philippines, since we have different dialects to each region and municipality or other areas of the Philippines, so our description might be different from that of the other um, patients from other regions, no? And then check also from the history from the others, no? Friends, families, observers. Sometimes patients reach at the ER because a bystander just saw the patient at the sides of the road, no, unable to, or sudden loss of consciousness. So you have to ask also, no, with the who brought the patient, and then family history, of course, if there is a genetic history, hypertension, diabetes, renal problems, history of brain cancers or lesions or seizure disorders. So that's part of the history of the patient. Medical illness, as mentioned earlier, from hypertension, diabetes, so and then dyslipidemia, history of drug abuse or mga toxins exposure, cigarette smoking, history of illicit drug use, both prescribed and not. So if there is history of seizure disorder, what are the medications the patients are taking, dementia, um, and others, and then, or depression perhaps, or any psychiatric disorders or medications, antipsychiatric, that could affect the mood of the patient. And then you formulate the impression of the patient using the opportunity while still talking to the patient. So you then formulate from the history and your physical examination your impression of the neurologic problem of the patient. Now, this is the parts of your neurologic examination, but it doesn't mean that uh, there is no hard and fast rule on how you do your neurologic examination, as long as these parts are included, no? So your mental status examination, your cranial nerves examination, your motor strength, reflexes of the patient, your sensory examination, coordination, and the gait. So mini mental status examination. So the bare minimum during the interview, look for the difficulties of communication of the patient. So ask or check whether the patient has recall or insights of the recent and past events. And then you generally observe how the patient speaks, no, and articulate, answers your questions. So this is usually done standardized screening in less than 10 minutes. So this is a part and parcel of your mini mental status exam. So by doing this, so less than 10 minutes, you already have the mental status of the patient. So that includes the level of consciousness, orientation, speech, language, memory, information, insight and judgment, abstract thinking, and also calculation. So for um, level of consciousness, so if basically when you do the exam, is the patient is awake, drowsy, stuporous, or comatose. So awake, readily conversant, drowsy if you still need to stimulate the patient, and then the patient responds and then sleeps again, or the patient, even if any type of stimulus the patient does not respond, then that is comatose. Orientation, so the bare minimum is you ask for is if the patient is oriented to time, place, and person. So you asked if the patient knows where he is currently at the hospital, ER, what time is it, and then the person accompanying the patient, no, probably the wife, daughter, son. So oriented to time, place, and person speech, no? So you ask, are you, by asking the patients these questions, so you already observe the articulation, the rhythm, the rate of the patient speaks, the prosody, so the pitch and accentuations, no? Languages, so you also observe when the patient answers, any verbal or written output, response to the command of the patient, or to you, from your command rather. So if the response is appropriate or not. Memory can be asked immediate, what was your last meal? Or you can ask the patient, you tell the patient three items. Let's say, for example, pen, paper, scissors. And then you ask the patient to remember those words, and then ask after the examination to repeat the three words that meant you ask the patient to memorize. And then long-term memory could be who was your first grade teacher or your high school advisory teacher and all that. Find of information, historic events, or mga personalities could be who is the current president of the Philippines or who is the current president of the United States or former president of the of the Philippines and all that. Insight and judgment. So you ask the patient, no, what would you do if you saw a wallet on the road or something like that. Abstract thinking. So ask the patient to describe similarities of a or list items having same attributes. Let's say, for example, give at least three four-legged animals, so dog, cow, and all that, so the patient can answer those. And then calculation, you ask the patient to subtract rather 7 from 100 until so on and so forth. So let's say, for example, from 100 minus 7, so 93 minus 7, 86 minus 7, 79, until the 100 is done. Or not 100, probably you can ask to subtract 3 from 20 until 0. So that's how you do your mini mental status examination. So next is your cranial nerve examination, no? So the bare minimum for this one is to check the fundi, the visual fields of the patient, the pupillary size and reactivity, the extraocular movements, and the facial movements of the patient, no? So they are best examined in numerical order except for your 3, 4, and 6, no? Cranial 3, 4, and 6, since they are done together, no? So for cranial nerve 1, so that's olfactory. You test the smell of the patient. You you can ask the patient to smell alcohol or your sanitizers and all that, or pwede put coffee. And then optic nerve, cranial nerve 2, so pupillary response, no? Or your visual acuity by making use of your Snellen's chart. And then 3, 4, 6, so they are done together. So that's examining your extraocular movements. And then you take note if there are any ptosis, your pupillary response and accommodation. And then without head movement, you ask the patient to follow your um, fingers, no? Downward, sideward, inward, upward, and all. And then after that, you 5, so that's cranial nerve 5. You ask the patient to clench the teeth and then palpate the masters. And then for 7, facial expressions. So if the patient is able to smile, raise the eyebrows, puff out cheeks, no? And then for the 8, so that's hearing. So you occlude one ear and then you whisper words and then ask the patient to repeat what you have whispered, examining both ears, no? Right and left. And then 9 and 10, you have your gog or swallowing reflex. So ask the patient, they say ah, and then note if the patient is able to swallow, and then the gog reflex of the patient, of course. 11, the accessory muscles. So ask the patient to shrug shoulders. And then for the 12, you have hypoglossal. So ask the patient to stick out his or her tongue and then move from side to side. Now, so that's your cranial nerve examination. So that's just basically the same. Next is your motor strength. So we already have your mini mental status exam and then your cranial nerves. So for motor strength, so you check for muscle atrophy and then the tone of the muscles of the patient, and then ask the patient to um, raise the arm, no, with resistance, and then grade accordingly. So that's 0 to 5. So 0 is no movement. 1 is flicker only, but no movement of the joints, even from left to right. So 2, movement with gravity eliminated. So that's left and right lang ang movement of the extremities. 3, movement against gravity but not against resistance. So um, still patient may be able to move up the extremities. 4, with some degree of resistance. And then 5, patient is able to move with full resistance. So that's full power. So um, it according to the 0 to 5, so 0 paralysis, there is literally no movement. 1, severe. 2, moderate. 3, that's mild resistance or weakness. And then 4, mild weakness. 5 is full strength. Now for reflexes, you check the biceps reflex, patellar, and then the Achilles reflexes of the patient. So they are also um, graded or scored. 0, absent. 1, present but diminished. 2, that's the normal reflex. And then 3, exaggerated. 4, there is already clonus, no? Now for the sensory examination, so this is the bare minimum. So ask the patient if they can feel the light touch or the temperature. So you can make use of the metal from your um, hammer, and then ask the patient to perform the Rumberg maneuver. No, so it could be from light touch, no, just by um touching the patient and then identify or ask if he can feel the touch temperature. So as mentioned, by making use of the metallic or metal portion of the reflex hammer, so it's generally usually cold. And then vibration by the use of your tuning fork, and then joint position. So this is actually you um, stimulate the patient from different or from two areas, no, and then ask the patient to identify which area or part of his body that you touch. Now, coordination. So you observe the patient at rest and during spontaneous movement, no? So you can ask the patient to do rapid alternating movement of the hands and feet, so pronation and supination, so just like this. So if the patient is able to do that, then the patient has good coordination. Or the finger to nose test, you ask the patient to from the nose, then touch again to your finger, and then you move your finger from different areas. One, and then you also refer to the fluidity of the movement of the patient. Next is gait. So normally, if the patient is ambulatory, then you can observe the gait. If you are examining the patient at your clinic, then once the patient enters the room, then you can already observe the gait of the patient, no? Or if not, then you can just ask the patient to walk at the bedside, no? So that if the patient maybe uh, uh, na, may fall, so dool ra sa bed, and then with support, of course, no? So if the patient is able to walk normally, or there is dragging of the heels and toes, so, or if the patient is able to walk in a straight line or zigzag, so that's how you um, observe for the gait of the patient. Now, so that's basically the things or the examination procedures that you will do to the patient, no? So for the neurologic diagnosis, so as mentioned, you observe or obtain it from the history of the patient, and then you identify the location and perhaps the pathophysiology, and then narrow it down by, uh, of course, the diagnostic possibilities that you will need to do with the patient. No? So next is the through CT scan, MRI, and others. And then some patients, no, during physical examination, although they have severe neurologic diseases, some neurologic examination may be normal. So some goes that the patient has a very morbid or bad neurologic examination, but the neurologic disease may be um, moderate lang or mild lang, no? If let's say, for example, TIA. And then some patients may arrive, as mentioned earlier, no, na from the road lang, brought by a concerned bystanders, and also there could be no adequate available history and medical history of the patient. So these are the of possible diagnosis and symptoms, no, pertaining to which part of your neurologic or brain or neurologic system. So for cerebrum, patient may present with abnormal mental status or cognitive impairment. No, patient may be confused, agitated, disoriented to time, place, and person. And then seizures also, if it affects depending on the right or left cerebrum, you have unilateral weakness depending on which part is affected, visual field abnormalities, and also movement disorders. No, it could either be tremor or chorea. In the brainstem, patient may have crossed weakness or sensory abnormalities of the head and limbs. So, patient may have weakness of the right face and left arm and leg. No, so depending on the if it uh if it reaches before the decussation part, no, wherein the cranial nerves decussates through your brainstem. So depending on that, that's the usual presentation of patients with brainstem disorders. Spinal cord. So from the patient presents with back pain or tenderness, weakness or sensory abnormalities sparing the head, and then motor lower neurons, sensory problems, or sphincter dysfunctions. Spinal roots, patient may present with radiating limb pain, weakness, or sensory abnormalities, and loss of reflexes. In the peripheral nerve, still limb pain, weakness, or sensory abnormalities following your nerve distribution. So the patient may present with stacking or glove distribution of sensory loss, and then also loss of reflexes. For neuromuscular junction, patient may present with bilateral weakness, including the face, no, ptosis, this diplopia, dysphagia. So these are problems most commonly yung imong mga myasthenia gravis. So they present with such. And then weakness with exertion. So in the morning, they are usually okay, but at the late afternoon, so the weakness progresses. And then sparing, of course, of sensation. Muscle could either be also proximal or distal weakness, and also sensation is spared in this type of problems. So for this, the most important task of a primary care physician faced with a patient who has new neurologic complaint is to assess whether you need to refer the patient to a neurologist or a specialist or not. So, and it is also imperative that we rapidly identify if the patient has an infectious process that is affecting the nervous system in cases of meningitis, and then also if stroke, no, if it's a hemorrhagic stroke or it's a infarct lung, and then also if there is already a spinal cord compression that is affecting the patient, no, leading to paralysis. And other treatable mass lesions could either be a mass or not, no? And that needs immediate care if there is already signs of increased intracranial pressure. So I think that would be my last slide. Thank you for listening. So do you have any questions?
None so far, Doc.
So none so far. So thank you. So this is taken from your Harrison's the book, my lecture. Okay. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, Doc.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you.